Ever have a child with this disease, I would kill it before I allow it to suffer as much as I've suffered. This is Deneen Griffin again. I call these my naked videos, and this is video number 2. Now, that statement I just made is a very heavy statement, and not many people would understand exactly why it was said. Now, that was made by my mother's cousin many, many years ago. He suffered from sickle cell. He passed away at 36. Um, he actually was in the Vietnam War. He got his leg all shot up, and he was still pushing. He had a family of his own. But because of how he did suffer, that's how he felt strongly about this disease. Because his life was actually full of suffering because there was such a lack of knowledge and lack of understanding. So he did not always have adequate pain control. Now, he actually prompted my mother to educate herself on sickle cell. A mother's intuition, she knew something was wrong with me, but she didn't know what just yet. And shortly after he passed away, I was diagnosed with sickle cell. And my mother knew she had a long road ahead of her, but she didn't back down from it. She threw the books at it, literally. She educated herself. She didn't rely on anybody else to do so. She didn't always listen to what the doctor said. She went off of what she felt was best for me. And I'm very grateful for that. But I don't know how many people could actually imagine seeing their child in pain and not being able to assist them. Because right now, I'm pretty sure some parents that are looking at this video like, oh, I don't understand that. Well, right now, if your child scrapes their knee, you pick them up, you love on them, you clean it up, you add a Band-Aid to it, or some of you just tell them to brush it off. But imagine your child screaming out in pain, and you go to comfort them and they scream even more when you touch them. Imagine if you couldn't pick your 1-year-old up or your 2-year-old up and coddle them and love on them and kiss on them and make things better. What I just described is what my mother experienced with raising me. There were times I could not be touched. There were times where if I even thought she was touching me, I was ready to scream because I was in just that much pain and there was nothing she could do but pray. Now, how would you feel if you couldn't help your child? That's what we're here for. We're here to protect our kids. How would you feel? What is it exactly that you would want to do? What in your mind do you imagine that you could do if you were in a situation where you could not help your child? All you could do was sit there and watch them cry. Now, I say that because I want everyone to have an understanding that this disease does not just affect me, the person that has it, but it affects the whole family. From the mother, the father, the sister, the brother, the grandmother, the aunt, the uncle, anyone close enough to actually witness a sickle cell crisis is affected by it. Because whether you're grown or not, you feel helpless. Now, I spent a great deal of my time in and out of the hospital. I was in and out so much so that my IV pole was named Freddie. Freddie Krueger, if you needed his last name. And to this day, I still call my pole Freddie. I don't know if it's a help to me or a hindrance, but I guess it's a comfort at the same time. Ever since I was at a very young age, the age of understanding, my mother has taken her time to explain exactly what happens with my blood, how it happens, and what I need to do to stay healthy. And I thank her for that because not everybody has someone to sit down and educate themselves so that you can properly be educated. Because a lot of times when I go to and from the doctor, I have heard a lot of can't, everything that I cannot do. It's very rare that they're going to tell you something that you can do because they are trying to give you a broad spectrum scope of this is how serious this is. So, in order for you to stay healthy, these are the things you don't want to do. You don't want to exert yourself. You don't want to have stress. You don't want to jump too hard. You don't want to scrape your knee because it can cause you to sickle. You don't want to get a small cut because it can get infected and put you in the hospital. It's a lot of things you don't want to do, but my mother always told me the things that I could do. She never limited me as far as exploration. She did tell me I had to limit myself and go and listen to my body. Now, as a very young child, I did tap, jazz, ballet. I did plenty of pageants, and I would go strong. And when I get sick, I go in the hospital. And then as soon as I got out, my mom said, "You want to continue?" And I would forge on to it. I spent a great deal of my life at Children's Hospital of Dallas. The sixth floor was my address, and whichever room I was in that week, that month, that was the room number. And within my different stays there, I did become frustrated because a lot of times I would be at home doing everything the doctor told me to do, and I would still end up in the hospital with no explanation. Um, my hospital stays were full of a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, but also a lot of good times. My mother made sure I stayed occupied. I sketch, I paint, I write poetry, I do anything I can as an outlet. Because when you go through something so painful, you always need an outlet. And I was very fortunate at the age of 9. My drawings were published in a poetry book called If Trees Could Talk. Um, the actual author's name is Joe Tave. That is not the that's not the actual name on the book, but um, I'm pretty sure if you Googled it, you would be able to find it. Um, the hospital was considered to be my first home, and I believe that it was. My second home was when I went home to visit my family. At least that's what I called it, because I did spend almost 50% of every year in the hospital. But my mother would never let me give up. She always told me how much I could do and how much I couldn't, and how much there was no way that I could limit myself as far as my dreams and my ambitions. She always said it might take you a little bit more time, but you can do it. And see, the doctors gave me a life expectancy of 14 years. And she would always tell me, "You're going to live past that, baby." They told me I couldn't have kids, and God has proved that completely wrong because I have 3 beautiful children. And of course, I have lived past the age of 14 because I am now 29 years old. And see, at the age of 11 is when the severity of my health really came into play. I had my first stroke, lost everything on the left side of my body. I was rendered to a wheelchair and told that I might never walk again and or be able to move anything on the left side of my body. Only thing I can say to that is, but God. I do have some residual effects from that. Every now and then, my left hand here, it'll drop, not want to be picked up again. And I pray my way through it. I try to move it, get the circulation up, and keep forging. After that stroke is when I got my first transfusion. They gave me an exchange transfusion. That was when they had to put me under light sedation to give me a central line because I could not go under general anesthesia at the time because my body was not strong enough to handle it. They believed that I might, after that particular stroke, that I might actually have a heart attack because I would start to sickle in my heart. So they put me under light sedation. They gave me my central line and they began the exchange transfusion. Exchange transfusion is where they take out blood as they are putting blood back in to try and replace my whole entire blood supply because at that time all my blood was sickle. From that point on, every 14 days, I had transfusions, 2 units, because your bone marrow tends to start to replace your cells every 14 days. My cells were starting to be made as sickled cells. They were not coming in perfectly round. They were coming in the sickle C shape. They were also coming in where my blood was hemolyzing off rip, which means that it was getting thick and hard to flow, and it was just coming in painfully. So they tried to counteract my body and suppress my bone marrow by giving me a transfusion every 14 days. And they did that for a year. They stopped the transfusions because they were worried about an iron overload. That tends to happen when you have too many red cells coming into your body, especially by them being donor cells. They were healthier than mine, so their iron levels were a whole lot higher. With that said, after my stroke is when Make-A-Wish came into play. Usually when Make-A-Wish comes in, that particular child has 6 months to a year to live. That was particularly difficult for my mother because she didn't want to believe that that's all that her baby had. And what I say to that is, but God. My mother prayed and prayed and prayed, and as you see, I'm still here. Now, I'm going to stop this video at my Make-A-Wish trip. Video number 3, we'll pick up from there. Be blessed.